Welcome to Behind the Warrior, a podcast presented by the EOD Warrior Foundation. This series will focus on resources, interviews, and topics impacting EOD warriors, their families, and the military community at large.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Maria Shabla, and today we are very excited to start the fourth interview in our Celebrating Women in EOD four-part series. And today we're speaking with Navy EOD veteran Jacquelyn Reed. Welcome to the podcast, Jacquelyn.
Hi, Maria. Thank you. And thank you so much for honoring women in this series.
Yeah, we're so excited to do it. So Jacquelyn, I always like to start from the beginning. Can you tell us a little about yourself? Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Sure. So I grew up in Colorado in a town called Longmont. At that time, it was a very small country town. I had two younger sisters, and we all lived in a pretty small little home. I think it was maybe 700 square feet, one bathroom, 5 of us total. But we had beautiful outdoors to play and have adventures, and there were cows to play with, hay, lakes, rivers, streams. So I'm really fortunate that I got to grow up in the country.
Wow. So there were mountains around your home where you grew up?
So we were it's called the Front Range. It wasn't quite mountains, but it wasn't too far to get to the mountains, maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes, and then we'd be in the foothills and then gradually into the mountains.
That is so nice.
Wow.
Cool. That's great. So what inspired you to join the military? What inspired you?
So it's interesting because nobody from my family was ever in the military. Did not come from any military. We didn't watch any military shows. But when I was a kid, I fantasized about playing, like being combative and playing these games, pretending I was stealthy. I would take these reeds and breathe through them in the lake and sneak up on my sisters. And I would I don't know. I just didn't know where I must have watched something, but we'd play these games. I'd play war with them and stuff. And I always felt that was my purpose, but I couldn't tell you why. It was just always there. And so it wasn't very traditional for me or my family. And this was pre 9/11 at the time. Mm-hmm. So not popular. It's you go to school, you go to college, you move on, play sports, whatever. But so I remember deciding my senior year, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go to the recruiting office and just go for this. And everyone was pissed, but I just did it. And I'm stoked that I did it,
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. So how did your sisters take playing war games with you? Were they on board with that, or are they you're weird?
Yeah, I mean, they were so cute. They weren't necessarily on board with it, but they would get into it eventually. But I made them. We now I know there were landfills. I didn't know what it was in the past. But these huge mounds, and it was so cool because we could climb up one side and try to kind of navigate, kind of ski down, poor man skiing down the other side. Oh my gosh! And I would make them be on we'd be on we'd have different vantage points. And one time I fell. And I cut my leg open. It was bleeding. We had to get stitches. And that was it freaked them out a little bit, but they were pretty good sports about it, as long as they were safe.
Wow, that's wild. So you went to the recruiter's office. Everybody was mad at you. Why did you choose the Navy?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So when I first walked in, I wanted to be in the Marines. That's what I wanted to do at first. The only reason, because they had this sword and they had this uniform, and it just looked amazing to me. I'm like, that's what I want. I want this sword. I want to go to battle. I really wanted to do that. So I go to join the Marines, and they weren't very friendly to women at the time, and they just said these sexist remarks right off the bat. And even though I was 17 or 18, I was probably right around 18 at that point. I just knew, I felt this weird feeling get out of this office.
Wow.
So I turned around, and this Navy recruiter pops up, and he was pretty chubby. And at first I was very judgmental, and I'm like, I don't want to join the Navy, He's like, no, come in the office. And he asked if I played sports, and I did play tennis at the time. And I was prepping for, I think it was state at the time. It was springtime. So he's like, oh, that's how he got me, and that's how he hooked me. He's like, I played tennis for the Navy. he busts out all these trophies and he's like, let's just go hit. And there's courts nearby the recruiting office. And so we hit, and I'm like, oh, he's actually really good for even a
Wow.
kind of out of shape dude. He was really good at tennis. And he kind of got me with that. Like, you can discover the world, play sports, do all these things, join the Navy. It's great, you know? And so that's what made me say, all right, I guess I'll give the Navy a shot.
Wow, what a welcome. Yeah. Like, let's go play tennis. I don't think that happens very often.
I don't think so. At least not anymore. I mean, this is a bit ago, so yeah.
Interesting. That is so wild. Okay, so when you first joined, what was your original career field?
Okay, so originally I thought, oh, maybe I'll be a corpsman, because they give you this book to read all these jobs. Descriptions of these different rates, they call them, but they're just jobs. And I saw this one that sounded rad. It was a language interpreter, like it's called CTI, a cryptologic technician interpreter. And what you get to do, you learn a language in Monterey, California for a year and a half, and then you're a linguist. And I'm like, whoa, because that was another fantasy I played in my head growing up. I'm like, I want to be a spy and speak. I like pretended I knew all these languages growing up too, you know? So I'm like, oh, it's all coming together. This is what I want to do. And so I go to the recruiter and I said, I want to go be a linguist. And he's like, oh, no, you'd be really smart to be a linguist. He was so mean.
Wow.
And he's like, we have to take this. It's a language proficiency test called a D-Lab. And at the time, I did play music growing up, so he didn't know that, and I didn't really disclose it because it was just something that I don't know. I didn't really disclose it, and so I'm like, I think I could do well in this test, and I did because of the music background. Because they teach you a fake language. This test, and tones and different things. So even with his doubts, I made it into being a linguist. And then the coolest thing, I know, and you get awesome. You get a $6,000 bonus straight away. And at that time, I was like, whoa, this is sick. Okay, so that's why I chose that to begin with.
What music did you play?
So my mom wanted us to play classical music, and during the time I played violin, and during the time I didn't like it, but then I thank her for that now, because I think it was a great gift to have and to train that side of my brain and way to express myself through the instrument. So it was pretty cool. We took it pretty seriously though.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So how long were you a linguist, and what did that look like?
Okay, so it was funny. Well, I'll tell this story real quick because it's kind of how I chose EOD after it. But I go to boot camp, and all of a sudden these guys show up, and we're all sitting around in a circle, and they're telling us about special forces. And these guys show up with these blue shirts. They're called UDT shorts, but they're like these khaki shorts, and they're tan, and they're fit, and they have like longer hair than everybody else. And I'm like, what is that job? They said they get to dive, they get to skydive, they get to shoot guns, they get to do all these things. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. So it's very interesting because I didn't know about any special forces or anything like that prior. But in boot camp, I heard about that. And so I really wanted to be, at the time, they were saying they were Navy SEALs. And I'm like, oh, I want to go be a Navy SEAL, but it wasn't allowed for women. And so they're like, well, I stood in the line. I'm like waiting. And they're like, you can't be in this line. This is men only. And I'm like, well, what's the next hardest thing I can do? And they're like, well, you can go to EOD. And so then I stood in the EOD line, and we had, at that time in boot camp, they have like dive motivator programs. So you all work out in the morning, and it's really cool. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. But they said I have to pick a different job, and it was supposed to be like a mechanic, an air, like something definitely not in my wheelhouse. So I said, no, I'm going to stay on track with linguist, but that was always burning in my head. Like, this is something else. So I had this in the back of my head. I go through language school. I loved Monterey, California. It was amazing. Amazing to go to school there. It was really hard. At first, I didn't think I needed to study. And it's like, you have to study. And in Chinese is hard. So that was the language I picked.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to go to Hawaii and go surfing. So I kind of chose that. But I liked it. I just didn't like, we were inside, literally in a tunnel, headphones on, wired to the computer, and that was
Mm-hmm.
it. And I just didn't have very much, like, I didn't feel like I fit into that culture as much as I maybe had fantasized about being a linguist prior. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a great entry into the Navy. I'm really glad I did that first because it helped me grow up a little bit as my frontal lobe was still developing at age like 19, 20, 21, you know?
Aw. And so did you get to surf in Hawaii?
Yes.
Good,
So,
good, good.
for sure, that's where I started surfing and kite surfing, and I fell in love with it.
Awesome. So what was the transition like out of being a linguist into EOD?
Oh yeah. So I worked in this base in Hawaii, and I remember the language contract was 6 years, and my 6 years was almost up. And I knew and this was right. So 9/11 had happened, everything was going on overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I just felt really blessed with my life at the moment. Like I had fun as a linguist. I had a good I guess schedule routine. I got to surf, I got to kite surf, and I did my job. And I lived on the North Shore of Hawaii. And I remember walking down,
Nice.
I know. I remember walking down the beach thinking like this is amazing, but there's conflict going on. And I just had that burning, like I need to go out there. So I
Mhm.
go to at the we have like a chain of command, like different bosses and leaders. And so I go to my next, I guess, boss, who was the chief, and I said, hey, I want to go be EOD. And they're like, well, girls can't do it. I'm like, no, I know they can. I've had this conversation when I was in boot camp. They said I could do EOD. So they knew nothing about that community. So I remember calling, yeah, I remember
Wow.
calling the base at it was Mobile Unit 3 Det Med Pack, it's called, in Hawaii. And as a linguist, I was working with a lot of civilians, analysts. It's a mix hodgepodge of professionals, and we're used to saying our name like first name basis. And my military bearing wasn't the greatest, so I wasn't like structured. And so I call and I'm like, "Hi, yeah, I want to try out." And I don't remember what I said, but this guy was like, "What the fuck?" He was just like off. Like he was like, "Who are you? What do you want to do?" So then I like show up. I show up and I remember showing up and it was crazy because this guy was huge and he was like shaking this protein shake, like eating raw eggs. And I'm like, it's just like everyone shaking their protein. There's like pictures of girls all over the wall of the bathroom. I'm like, this is so gross. What am I doing? But I knew, I'm like, I'm supposed to be here. I know it. They don't know it yet, but I know it. And so we do this interview, and he was just stone cold, like no smile, just stone cold, like, why do you want to do this? And he was pretty, and right away they're like push-ups. There was like handprints on the floor outside the office, and you have to like line your hands up, and they're like push-ups until like you stop. And it was hundreds. I was like sweating everywhere. Get up on the pull-up bar, like all this stuff. So they were hard on me, but it was cool. I loved it.
Wow.
So at that time, I know. So at that time, we called it mud pupping. And I don't really know where that originated from, but you get to go for like maybe 4 weeks to 8 weeks, and you're attached to the mobile unit and you just get to learn about it, almost like an apprenticeship before you make entry into it.
Hmm.
And so I was there for 2 months with this group of dudes. And yeah, they put me through the ringer. They really it was tricky because I was fast and I could swim from surfing. I could do pull-ups, but I wasn't big. Like I didn't have the muscles to really carry things. And so I remember they're like, they hated it because I could run circles around them and swim around them. And I kind of thought that's hot shit, you know what I mean? They're like, no, we need to bat you down. And so I remember there's this 155 military round, like a dummy round that you train with. It's really heavy. I don't know how much it weighs. Maybe like 80 pounds ish. It's just awkward to like lift it up. And he was like, you need to pick this up and carry it up and down the berm. And I could not pick it up. And I was like,
Oh
shoot.
no.
But that's when the reality hit. They're like, you need to change your body and figure out how to do this because this is a serious job. And that's why they were so hard on me. They're like, this is serious. You have to be able to drag us out of in combat situations. And it really like changed my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. I was so grateful for that piece of knowledge, even though at the time I was like, this guy is such a dick. But I was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
happy for that because it really made me focus on my weaknesses, so that when I went into EOD, I felt really prepared physically for it.
Wow, that is interesting.
But it wasn't
So
easy.
it doesn't sound easy at all. Oh my gosh. But so you said it was mud pup?
Yeah, they call it mud pupping.
Okay,
They
okay,
did.
mud
I don't think
pupping.
they have that anymore, but they did do that before.
I've heard that
Because
term before.
you
Yeah.
have?
Yeah, I
Okay.
have. I have.
Okay.
Um, so after that, like after you mud pup, how do you actually
Yes.
like get in to the
Okay. So
field?
then I mud pup, and then you have to do the entry level physical screening test, which I don't really know the minimums, but I know it's like you have to do like 6 pull-ups, swim, push-ups, sit-ups, and run a mile and a half. And so I just trained on that a lot. So that was those scores. They you send a package in and they're like, okay, you have decent enough scores, you can come to dive school. And that was the first part of EOD school for Navy. It was like dive school first,
Hmm.
and then EOD school.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I loved it because I was I felt I loved being physical. I loved working out. So at first, it's those eyes of all the guys, and I just know I remember we were in class, and there's a pull-up bar in the front of class, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm sitting in the back, and I'm kind of intimidated because there's no girls, you know,
Hmm.
and just the way it's just this different energy of all the guys, you know,
Hmm.
um, especially with everything going on in the world, like everyone wants to get amongst it, and so when they see a girl, they're like, what are you doing here? At that time, at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so I remember thinking on the next class break, I'm like, screw it, man. I'm just going to jump up on that pull-up bar because that was the way they would make. Because I'm like, I know if I just bust out as many pull-ups as I can, they'll change their tone and energy towards me. And so I did the first break. I just jumped up there and I was like, boom, boom, boom. And it really helped because they're like, all right, you can do pull-ups. All right. Yeah. So then
Wow.
it helped so much because then the rest of the time I had friends and I'd already been in the military, so we call them fleet returnees.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people that's their first job is EOD, and so it felt fun. It felt good to have a little bit of seniority amongst the class, and then be able to back it up physically, because that's the way they measured you at back then was your physical ability, at least in dive school.
Do you remember how many pull-ups you did?
I was always able to do 15 to 20.
Ah, yeah, that's pretty good. That's so interesting that that's how you got their
Yes,
attitudes to
respect.
change. Yeah,
I
yeah.
know. I know. It was like
Interesting.
I remember shaking, but I was like in the zone. I'm like, I know this is gonna pay off, and it did.
Yeah. So you had mentioned to me before that when you were going through school that there was one other woman going through that you knew of, but that you never saw her. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was staggered. Like she was a class ahead, and I heard her name. And I never got to see her, but I always heard her name, and eventually we actually ended up we're really good friends now. She's an
Wow.
officer. She's a captain, Navy EOD captain, and she's about to command her first um she's going to be a commander of a command. So she's a stud. But I remember
Wow.
always hearing her name. I'm like, I want to meet this woman. And eventually, her name is Sarah Terse. And eventually, we connected, and now we're really good friends. So
Wow. Shout out to Sarah. That's awesome.
shout out to Sarah. She's rad. Yeah.
So can you tell us what it was like being in a school where there were only two females?
Yeah. So this was horrible. So I just remember the first. So in dive school, it didn't matter. In dive school, I felt fine. Divers are fun, you know. It's about diving. It's very different. But then EOD school seemed a lot. The energy changed in EOD school, and I don't know if it's because it's gearing you up to go out and do some serious. It's probably because you're gearing up to do some serious stuff, you know,
Hmm.
for your career. But
Yeah.
they grabbed because it's a joint training command. So we have Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy. And the Navy class sticks together as long as they can, but sometimes if you fail out, like I failed out on one of the things, I had to roll into it. It's called a surface class with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But we all PT together as Navy. And I remember we're in this big circle, and this time the girl wasn't, Sarah wasn't there anymore, so it was just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in this circle, and the names of, I don't even think it's like not appropriate, the names we use for things anymore, but they called it circle jerk PT back then. This is just the way
It
was,
is what it
you know?
is, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
So we're in this circle, and our class was a new class. So we're like the newbies. And there's definitely a hierarchy for seniority. It's like, oh, even though you're 4 weeks behind another class, they're just like, oh, you're just a newbie. It's always
Mm-hmm.
that kind of mentality carries with you your whole career, actually. So the master chief at the time, I really don't care for him. I won't say his name, but he grabbed me and he put me in the center and he said, I want you to lead an exercise. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, is it gonna be push-ups, lunges, squats? No, it was jumping up and down, hands straight. Can you believe that? And it was like jumping,
Jacquelyn.
right? Like, what the hell? And so I just remember thinking like, and I just like, this is crazy, dude. Because at that time, the mentality was get them out of here. Because, so I'll give you a little history of why they were like this. At that time, EOD is still under like big Navy because we ride carriers and we have to support the big Navy. But they wanted to make EOD part of Navy Special Warfare, which would be a different group. But because women they weren't allowed to do that until 2016. So this was back in 2008, 2007. And so they're like, we can't have women here or else we won't ever get to be in Navy Special Warfare, which would be attached to the SEALs, attached to the special boat teams and different kinds of funding groups and roles and responsibilities. So they were doing anything they could just to get any woman like out of there. I know, but it fueled me. I'm like, come on. Like, it just fueled me. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Well,
I know.
yeah, I mean, and times have changed, and
So
we know
much.
more and more women are in the field now, but that's incredible.
I know.
Like, I cannot
It's
believe
crazy.
what you must have gone through.
Because I just remember thinking like, shoot, I feel very alone. Because I'm not really part of the club. I don't have the right chromosomes to fit into this club. It is definitely a boys' club. So it was just different, but it allowed me to be more introspective. And eventually I said, I just wanted to understand the male's brain more. Because I was like, if I can understand why they think the way they do, sympathize with it, have some compassionate latitude, then I think we can fit in because we should be complementing each other, not competing and tearing each other down. It's like, you guys, it's good to have diversity, you know?
That is incredible. So, so tell us about how, because I think about this a lot about the females that they graduate and they usually go to their first station, and again, they're the only female. So,
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us about that. How was it?
I remember checking in to my first command with two other guys. And in my head, I thought I did pretty well in school. And so I thought they were communication. Like in my mind, I thought, oh, they're probably going to be like, oh, you're going to have some good talent coming to you. So I was expecting, I'm like walking with these other two guys who were fine, but I mean, they were good. They were fine, middle of the pack. But I was like, dude, I was top of my class. Like, they're probably going to be welcoming me. Like, yeah, come to the club. No. They're like, hey, bro. And they just looked at me. They're like, the female locker room. We didn't even have a women's locker room. It was like across the street. And and I'm like, so talk about being isolated, but now physically like having to go and shower, use the bath. Like, it's fine. It was across the street. It wasn't like it was that far, but you miss a lot of that camaraderie and you just feel so separated and alienated from the beginning. So that was hard. And I was at Mobile Unit 3 in San Diego. That was my first duty station in EOD. And it's like called high base. There's like all these little spaces with these big sliding garage doors almost. And so you walk down and there's just, dudes in each little bay. And I'm just like, oh my God, they're so intimidating. And a lot of them are such studs too. Like there's a lot of amazing warriors coming
Mm-hmm.
from that unit. And so I just feel like every day I just felt this, I don't know how to describe it. It was really heavy, intense energy, and I felt a lot of pressure. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything wrong at all. I just felt like so much under the microscope. And I was like, it was intense. And a lot of times I would just go like cry in the locker room across the street because I'm like, they can't see me cry. But it's just like I just felt isolated a little bit, you know? But like
So,
it I had some friends from surfing and that was cool. So that was like my in was through surfing and I really like jumping and skydiving. So I did get some of the cool guys to kind of sponsor me, if that makes sense. So
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm.
and then I just like put in the work and eventually they said, I mean, eventually they accepted me, but it took some time.
Like
Like my
go ahead.
how long?
Yeah.
Yeah, like so my first chief, I remember we're in the high bay and he's calling us all up one by one to get to know us, which was good leadership. I remember his first thing he told me was, I'm old school, man. I don't know about chicks. I don't know about having it. I've never had a chick. I don't know what to do with you. Like, I'm like, just give me a chance. And it's just so funny what we had to go through back then just to prove that have a seat at the table. So I just put
Wow.
that down and just did it. And then it was funny too because so all the guys, it was like a big thing to go be attached to a SEAL team and do Navy Special Warfare deployments. And that was like the measure of how good of an EOD tech you were back then. It was like, how many combat deployments have you done? What have you done as an operator? And so for me, they're like, you're not doing any of this stuff. You're going to be in charge of the diving locker, do the diving stuff, which was kind of an ego blow to me, but I'm actually glad for it now, looking back, because it allowed me just to focus on this thing. And I'm like, okay, this will be my thing. This will be my niche,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So
What, the diving part of it
mhm,
or
the diving
okay.
part of it.
Okay. So tell us about your career. So I mean,
Mhm.
it sounds like it was such a struggle just to just to be there.
It
Um
was.
and you certainly helped pave the way for all the women coming in today. So thank you for that, for your perseverance and your
Or
strength, because that's just incredible. But tell us about, when you finally did click and they started to respect you and
yes.
what path your career took.
So that's where I'll go back to saying like I was actually thankful for the responsibilities of the diving because I got to go be a dive supervisor and go through different schools to be a team leader or in charge of the whole dive side. And
Mhm.
even though the focus was in on land with Afghanistan and Iraq at the time, we still had to keep up our diving skill sets. And so I was kind of junior. I'd only been in EOD for a year and a half, and I was a supervisor because none of them wanted to do that. But I'm like, all right. And I just remember it was really cool. We have these uh, I think it's every 2 years, 2 or 4 years, there's a huge inspection that a master diver does for the command and make sure that they're still keeping up on all the different types of diving. We have like a rebreather called a Mark 16. We also call it the death rig because it's just a very complicated diving apparatus with computers and the way it works is not as easy as open circuit with scuba. And so they wanted to inspect us on this. And since I was the only current dive supervisor, I was the and supervisor for the whole exercise. And so I remember this master diver who was very well respected in the dive community and just a hard dude, intimidating. He saw me loading up tanks and doing all this stuff that like at the time I was an E5, so pretty low on the totem pole. And he's like, "Aren't you the supervisor?" I said, "Yes." He's like, "Come here." And I'm like, "Oh, no, here's my first like what I do wrong." He's like, "If you're the supervisor because they're not doing it, you tell them what to do." And it was like he like mentored me on how to be a leader and up and out. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like here I am. I get to tell all these dudes that are what to do now and like control the side and make them carry the tanks and do all this stuff because I'm the supervisor. And so I think after that, and they put me through different scenarios, and I had to solve these problems in the water and show that we were safe and proficient in diving. And this commanding officer and the executive officer pulled me afterwards and said, wow, they said they were using me as kind of like a scapegoat. Like, we don't know if we're going to pass it. And so they're like, you crushed it. And so it really brought my respect in the whole command up a lot. And it really helped. That's when I was looked at as a subject matter expert in that specific thing. So then I'd help get other guys qualified up and test it out. And that was like the first thing that I was like, okay, here it is. Like, I'm in.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So who was it? Who was it that mentored you?
So that time it was the Master Diver Valentine was his name, is his name. And then after that, the same chief that told me that he didn't want to work with women, and he's like, I don't know what to do with you. He actually was a fantastic mentor. He did it in a very different way. He was very hard on me, but he did it. So now I look back and it's funny, we're friends. We still hang out. His name is Don Juarez. And he wasn't easy on me, which was good. He was fair, even though I look back, I'm like, dude, you were way harder on me but he saw potential and he's like, I want to groom you so that you can go be a leader and be strong in this community because you need to have such thick skin in this community at that time. Even now, I think, probably. So he was a good mentor. It was a different style than I was used to, but it was good.
So how long were you in EOD Tech, and can you tell us about some career highlights?
Yeah. So that was probably a huge highlight with the dive inspection. But 2 years after EOD, I got this letter at the command, and it was a screening for a special program at a Tier 1 unit. And I thought it was a joke at first, but I went through this pretty arduous screening and selection program. And I thought it was a 3-letter agency. I'm like, who is this? But I'm like, this is really rad. And I just kept it starts with maybe like 5,000 people and it dwindles down, and we graduated a class of 6. And
what?
I know.
5,000 to 6.
Yeah. And
over like how long of a time period?
About a year.
Holy cow.
I have all little phases. And it's interesting because some of the stuff it's either a rural environment or an urban environment. And it's just, I was like, what is this? But it was cool. I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Whatever this organization is, whatever this unit is, I think this is it. And so when I got accepted and they told me who they were, it was a huge highlight because at the time I still felt pigeonholed in EOD because women weren't technically allowed to be in combat roles. But this special program was my entry into like the big dogs in a Tier 1 unit with tons of funding and tons of special missions to do rad stuff for our country. And I'm like, all right. And that was a huge career highlight. And what was really neat is while I was going through it, the guys were like, all right, we're too curious now. What are they having you do? And they wanted to know everything about it. Even though we had to sign like a non-disclosure and I couldn't talk about it, but they knew because I'd like come back from some event and I'd lost a lot of weight because we were, rucking and walking and climbing, and I was getting in really, really good shape too. So we'd have like command PTs where everyone works out together, and I'd just be like finishing first. I was like circles around these guys. They're like, what is going on here? And so it was kind of cool to see them like. Then they started to give me, they're like, okay, we're going to give you literature. So it was cool because some of the guys were giving me books to read and different like ideas on like what's going on in geopolitical tensions and what different agencies have done in the past, and different mindset techniques to get locked on for this future job. So that was another career highlight to see the guys lift me up and support me to go on to this unit.
Wow.
So that was cool. Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but I do remember you saying that you're really going to have to take some time to think of stories that you can share with
Yeah.
us. So, do you have some stories that you can share with us about your career after this uh, training?
Yeah, so I'll share this one story. I can't tell the country that I was in, but I can tell the assignment. So the assignment was to find this terrorist, capture him, and then take him to back to our country for trial because he really messed up. um, and so
It sounds
I
like a movie.
it kind of was like a movie actually. So at the time, I had a niche in this new tier 1 special command, special program, and I was really good at surveillance, and that was my thing. And so to find this individual, I got to be the team leader, and they actually boarded me. And I was one of the first, I actually was the first female NSW team leader, and it's written in like my DD 214, and it's like official. So that was really cool. And I had, these SEAL master chiefs from all these different squadrons board me to be in this role so that it was taken seriously because if it was hard for EOD, imagine trying to lead SEALs. You know what I mean? And so this helped a lot to have that credential and
Mm-hmm.
backing. And that was really cool to be able, because I got to be creative with the problem and I got to learn so much from these guys who were some of them like reconnaissance and breachers and assaulters. And you learn so much from the way they do things. I got to incorporate that with my surveillance piece. And we successfully found this man, this terrorist, successfully captured him and transited him back to CONUS, back to the United States for trial. And that was like, and it's funny because we rehearsed it and anything that could go wrong went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember that was the first time I remember my adrenaline just so spiking that my heart rate was going nuts. I thought that the enemy could hear it because I was literally like disguised behind enemy lines, like doing this. Like I was just like, and I remember my other mentor was this fantastic team leader, and he was on radio, and he was just like, I must have known. I don't know how he sensed that I was just like almost. I was getting super myopic. Like it was like fight or flight response. I was dwindling. I was just getting my parasympathetic and sympathetic were just off track, and he's just like, breathe, breathe, and I just was breathing, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I just like it was cool. It was very awesome to get that done. And then to have these guys that are just awesome help and learn from them as well. So we have like this picture, and we have our flag, the American flag, and we have our squadron, like our unit's flag, and we're all standing there, and we got done with the op, and it was like, and we poured like shots, and it was cool. And then we flew back home, like you just felt like a hero, you know what I mean? So it was a good highlight.
Wow. Yeah, you are a hero for sure. I'm just like, as I'm listening to you, Jacquelyn, I'm just like seeing you as a little girl, and then now you're like actually living that dream. You know, that little girl
I
that was on the
know.
landfill,
I
busting up her
know.
leg, and then there you were, just like that's incredible.
Isn't that weird? It's almost like I was
Yes.
manifesting it as a child, and it happened, and I just felt like this is it. This is like my purpose, at the time. So it
Wow,
worked out
wow. So
really
where do you
great.
go? Where do you go from there? I mean, after you've like had this incredible, successful mission, like what next?
That's what's so tricky about being out of the military now, it's just a different chapter. So it's funny because I still communicate and I'm really good friends with a lot of the guys I worked with. And we're all retired now. So we find projects where we can still work together, but we do it more on the training aspect. So we provide training to people. But we always, get together and talk story about our times together. But yeah, it's tricky to get that same kind of rush, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And you just recently retired, correct?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us what that was like for you.
So the first thing I did, and I'm glad for it, I was living in Virginia Beach at the time, and I had spent 10 years there. And I took a step out of that unit, that command, and I went to go work in Coronado as a SEAL instructor. And so that was my first transition because it was going from being operating and being forward deployed for 10 years to now being an instructor and not deploying. And I remember feeling really antsy then. I was like, wait a second. I want to be out there. I want to be the person. And the first part was hard, but then I realized I really liked training and teaching people and watching them learn and the way they're just, it was cool to watch them, I guess, overcome an obstacle and grow and that's the future. So I'm like, okay, I can do this. If it's in this kind of role, this is good. But then I was still in the military, so I didn't have time to really think about everything I'd been through and internalize everything. So the first year after retiring, I was just a kind of a mess. Like I didn't want to socialize with anybody. I didn't feel like I belong. I felt like a back to where I was this little girl in EOD with all these guys. I'm like, huh, who are these? Who do I talk to? You know? Plus, I removed myself from this network of really close friends in Virginia to like a fresh start in California. And so that was tricky at first. And then that's when I found surfing as this wonderful therapy and really embracing the water, embracing people that I surf with now and then surfing to travel and learn from other cultures. And that was really helpful because you have nothing, you just sit in the water, you are in the moment completely. And you are thinking of things, but it's just something about it where you're so present, it allows you to reflect on a lot of things and certain things just pop in your brain and then you process it in a different way and look at it in a different mind, like perspective. And it helped me go through my entire career because there are times when I was like angry and upset and pissed off and all these things were coming to surface and the ocean really has helped me deal with those and go back through them, those memories.
Really, really, really.
Ah.
So were you able to surf like throughout your career and that was your outlet while you were in the military and then afterwards you leaned into that to help?
Yes. So I always had that passion for the water and for surfing, but it's tricky with nature because you never know Mother Nature. You never know when there's going to be a swell or a wave. So then coming to that, and that's also why I wanted to move to California because there's waves in Virginia and Outer Banks in North Carolina. You can find them and hurricane swells can be really good there, but it's hard with work because you can't just be like, oh, I'm not going to work today. I'm going to go surf, you know? So living, yeah. So living here, I really got to, like you said, like lean into it and learn more and more about what storms create, which swells, where to go. And yeah, it's been cool.
Wow. So at any point, did you seek out mental health or while you were in the military or afterwards? Or you just kind of have done it on your own?
No. So like, while in, I was so afraid to seek any kind of help. We did have we had a psychologist who would do these. He's like, I have to do your annual checkup from the neck up, he called it. And I was just a brat. I would go in vain. I wouldn't open up. I'm like, I just don't want to, only because I felt, and I don't know if this is right. I just didn't want it to be within the organization. I just knew that, I just didn't like that. Also, I was afraid, oh, what if something disqualifies me from operating or deploying? I was really scared about that. Yeah. Even with the physical stuff, I was like hiding every injury to make sure you could go to work. So then since I got out, I found it was called the Boot Campaign. And they specifically work with like TBIs and PTSD. And they're a great organization. And they linked me up. And this is so crazy. The first thing they said we're going to have you do is called HeartMath. It's called heartmath.org. And they linked me up with this mentor. And her name is Sandra Travis. She's amazing. She's in her 70s. She was in the Peace Corps. She's a stud. And she was my coach. And I was so judgmental when I first saw her on Zoom. I'm like, how is this woman going to help me? I love her. I've been linked. I've been so fortunate. Our sessions are going to end soon, but like I've been with her for over a year. We would meet,
Wow.
at first we were meeting like every 2 weeks, then it was like every month. And through Heart Math organization or heartmath.org, it's neat because they've done a lot of studies because you know how our brain controls everything and sends messages to our bodies.
Hmm.
Well, they're saying that the heart sends messages to the brain and they're testing that. And they're saying there's ways to, you know how there's ayahuasca and all these plant medicine and things to remap your brain's wiring.
Hmm.
So if you see a situation or you're in a stressful situation or you're very angry, especially with TBI injuries, your personality changes. And so this heart math org is to focus on your emotions, sending a message to your brain, and it's your heart rate might stay the same, but the sine wave is smooth and it causes you to still have, whether it's energized high heart rate or peaceful calm low heart rate, you're just having a very smooth sign like communication path from your heart to your brain. And it's taken a lot of work because you hook up, it's about 10 minutes of breathing and focusing, and you just focus on positive emotions.
Hmm.
And it's neat because when you're really in sync with this, you can do it on the fly. Like, so if you're in traffic and your response is to get angry and pissed and yell, you feel that it triggers you, and all of a sudden you do what you've learned through this heart math breathing app, and you get into this coherent state, and it's just you can deal with the situation a lot better.
That is incredible. Like,
It's
I am
so
so
cool.
fascinated by this heart. It's
Yes.
heartmath.org.
Yes, and
Okay.
they make it's so cool how they do it too. If you Google it, any research that they've ever done is there.
Hmm.
So you can pull up and read what they've done, how they've measured the heart. And when you're in a coherent state, certain animals respond, like dolphins respond to you, dogs. And it's really neat how they've done these studies and how you can play with it with animals too. It's pretty rad. Horses, they say the horse is a mirror to your soul, and that is true. Like they sense, you know how they sense your energy, and if you have any black or coldness or anger or jitter, they react, they mirror you. And so it's really neat to see how this is could possibly help everybody, not just military, TBI, PTSD, everybody, because we're all human, and
Yeah, yeah.
this is just a cool tool that I'm really enjoying. And it was the thing that I didn't think I was going to like at all. I wanted to do all these other sexy programs, and this was
Hmm.
this heart math and this woman. It, Without them, I don't know where I'd be.
How
It's
did
been
how did you even find heart math? Like, how did that come about into your life?
so it's through the boot camp pain. It was one of the
Okay, okay.
and they make I think they make everyone do it.
Hmm.
You have to really lean in to get the full benefits, just like with everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just decided to lean in because I'm like I'm not a very good human right now. And so I wanted to lean in because I was so judgmental on everything and everyone. I don't know if it was because I came from this unit where the mission was the mission and we were all focusing on the same thing, cut from the same cloth, just hard charging. And then in normal life, it's everyone has their own mission, right? And I
Hmm.
was very judgmental on that. I'm like, I don't want to have any friends that aren't did what I was just closing myself off. And
Hmm.
this has allowed me to be open and realize, oh, there's beautiful humans in the world. Or even if they're not, you can work to maybe help them become beautiful humans and interact and link with them and exchange with them. And it's been cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I imagine that there's a lot of people that go through that experience that you did
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
that feel those emotions and that anger or
Yeah.
um so what would you say to anybody listening who might be struggling themselves right now,
Mm,
post service?
yeah. So it's okay to be struggling because it's normal. It's part of the process. But I would go back through and see what are your values, like what's important, what's your legacy, because it's not our career, it's not our military career. It's something bigger than that. It's how we're leaving this earth. and how we're leaving our family and what we're doing to others and sharing our knowledge and making people in this place better. And I think once that shift comes off of like us selfishly, like, oh, me, and then it's like, no, it's we, it's us, you can find that you can get the same feeling of that team, that camaraderie with other people with humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's helped me a lot transition. And also like have compassion with yourself going through your transition, because it's not easy. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work, and it's okay because you're going to get triggered by things. But when you can recognize you're getting triggered, and when you can like the sooner you can recognize it, the sooner you can start to change it and shift it
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
reframe your thoughts. And we're in control of that. We're in control of our thoughts and our emotions. So that's kind of my advice.
That's incredible advice, Jacquelyn. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, on that same vein, there's many, many more women coming into the career field, and we are celebrating women in EOD.
Oh,
So,
cool. Yeah.
looking back at your career, what advice would you give to females coming through NAV School EOD right now and starting their careers?
Okay, so one thing I was almost ashamed of being a woman. I hid my femininity. I was trying to fit in so much that I lost who I was intrinsically. I almost lost some of my soul. So I would say keep yourself, know yourself, be proud to be a woman, because celebrate being a woman, because it's our differences that actually collaborate and work with the males. And so we don't have to be like them. We can
Mm-hmm.
be different and complement each other. And so it took me a long time to figure that piece out. I remember I was chewing tobacco, I was doing everything to be like a dude, right?
Uh-huh.
And then eventually I'm like, I want to just embrace, and I'm still working on that
Mm-hmm.
now, but that would be my advice. Be proud. You deserve to be here. You deserve a seat at the table, and just be you.
Wow, that is great advice. So, you also started an organization called Athena Defense Group. Can you tell us
Yes.
about that?
Yes. So, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got out of the military. And the Honor Foundation is another really good transition program where they help profession they help you with your resume, and they LinkedIn accounts, and they work on finding your why. Like, what's your why? What's your purpose? And I was doing different things, and this one woman told me, because I was living in my van at the time. I had a camper van. I was like taking all these adventures.
Oh,
It was fun.
fun.
It was cool. And she's like, I really want to do that, but I'm so scared that, you know, I'm just scared, I'm scared to be by myself as a woman. And I'm like, well, let me just teach you a self-defense class. So I met her that evening, and we just worked on some self-defense and combative principles and mindset and situational awareness. And she's like, I love this. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Maybe this can be what I do through Athena Defense Group. I can package everything I've learned throughout my career and help empower women and children and families to be confident and to be able to know what they need to do in situations, so that they can continue to find adventures and do things and not feel like afraid, because they're going to be confident because they have the tools they need to defend themselves and their family. So that's
That's
Athena Defense.
incredible. Well, and I guess I'm going to show my age, but like I feel like that way too. Like I totally
Cool.
feel like being a woman has kind of like prevented me from having the courage to do things that I may
Yeah.
otherwise have done. So I think that's incredible that you started this organization. So
Thank you.
so how long have you been doing it, and what does it look like?
So I've been doing it for about 2 years. The first I'm changing it each year, kind of tweaking it.
Mm-hmm.
At first I was doing studios where we meet once or twice a week, and whoever wants to show up, and we do self-defense class. Now I'm morphing it to different types of branches. Like if it's either weapons, I can go, like a lot of times people want to have guns, but I don't know if you shoot or have a gun, but when you go to the gun range or you go to the gun shop, there's that same type of masculine kind of energy that is intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that. So I'd go to if a woman booked me, I'd go to her house. We do it in her living room. I teach her everything about the weapon in a nice, safe, calm environment. And then we go to the range together. And I'm like, all right, you're going to be a boss in here. You're going to be confident. You already know how to handle your weapon because it's loud when you're shooting and everything. And so it's like, that's just another stressor for learning. And so we do everything, we call it dry in a safe environment. Then we come, and then now you can actually practice what you just learned in your living room on the range, and you can go by yourself next time, you know? So that's one of the things. I'll do confident traveler course. And I'm experimenting with that now, like on my overseas travels as a solo female. I'm coming up with my
love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, because it's so fun to travel, and sometimes it's really fun to go by yourself because you're open and you can meet different people, but you don't want to be hindered by security reasons, or you want to be aware and prepared. And there's things you can do before you even step foot into another country to support yourself for that and give yourself the tools needed. So that's another course I do.
I'm so excited about that course, and I hope it goes online one day.
Yeah, that could be like, so yeah, exactly. Any feedback you have, because
I would love to take a course like that. That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, Jacquelyn, it's so incredible to sit down and talk to you and just hear all these amazing stories of your career and the wonderful things that you're doing post-service.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just for that fantastic advice. I hope that this interview will get to many ears to be inspired by you and your courage through your career. And so just thank you so much.
Of course, and thank you for having me, and thanks for doing what you're doing as well, because you're bringing these stories to air and to broadcast, and it's been fun to listen to who you've interviewed in the past. And even though I don't know everybody who you've interviewed, it's nice because now it's like, oh, there's another story I get to hear, and it's really cool to hear, especially with women, like what they're doing now and the support network they have. It really makes me like very happy. So thank you for doing what you do as well and bring these stories to life.
Yeah. I think we might have to continue this. So beyond the 4.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, cool. So we're going to end the interview like we always do. It's our tradition to ask you some of your favorite things.
Okay.
So the first one, what is your favorite way to let off steam and stay sane? I think you already answered that, though.
It has to be surfing, yeah.
Is there anything apart from surfing that you like to do in your spare time?
Yeah, I do like to hike and to run and swim. So all kind of physical stuff.
Yeah, sounds like it. Not surprising, though, at all. What is your favorite restaurant in San Diego?
So I really like this taco spot called Hagos. And it's cool because there's like a huge, it's like Jacques Cousteau mural on the wall, and it's indoor-outdoor seating. And the food is really good. It's organic. But what I love about it is you can just sit outside. It's along the 101. And just people watch. It's just a really cool vibe. That's
awesome. What is it called again?
Hagos. Haggos. I don't know if you pronounce it Hagos or Hagos.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so if I'm ever in San Diego, I'll be stopping by.
Check it out. Call me and I'll come meet you.
I will. So what is your favorite break to surf?
Okay, so it's going to be in another country. I took a trip to Nicaragua recently, and there's this break called Popoyo. It's like I still dream of it. I want to go back. That is my favorite break to surf.
Wow, that's so neat. What was so great about it?
So it's cool because there's no infrastructure near it. It's literally just this break, and it's on a reef, but there's channels. So it's not hard to get out even when it's really big. You have these channels to get out there, and it's just such a perfect wave, and it's a left and a right, so you can go both directions, and the water's just cool and beautiful and blue, and it's warm, so you don't have to wear any wetsuits. And it just feels cool because you're just there with fellow surfers, and to get to that break you have to walk, and there's not many people around, so I like it.
Do you shortboard or longboard or both?
I prefer shortboarding, but if it's really tiny and I need to get in the water, I'll take a bigger board, like a fun board or a mid-sized board out.
Yeah, neat. So Nicaragua. What is it? What city is that nearest to?
That is Popoyo.
Okay, that's the name of the city?
Yeah, the city and the break is Popoyo.
Oh, nice.
It's about, so the capital is like Managua, so it's like an hour and a half south of Managua.
Do you see yourself going back there one day?
Totally. Yes. I want to go back, but I want to do, because just got back from a trip in El Salvador and I went surfing there as well.
Uh-huh.
And I want to do where I go from El Salvador, because it goes El Salvador's north and then Nicaragua is in the middle and then Costa Rica south. I just want to do a whole excursion down the coast.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, it would. I actually backpacked Costa Rica after I graduated college.
Really?
It was fun. Yeah.
Did you love it? Isn't it so beautiful there?
I loved it. I did. It's so different now. Back then, like we could have a hotel for like $13 a night. So we just landed in San Jose and took the bus to like whatever city we wanted to for like a month.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was super cool.
That's awesome. You did that. That's cool.
So what's your favorite place to vacation now? Is it in South America or?
Yeah, I think I'm really digging Central America. I really like it.
Nice. Nice. Well, Jacquelyn, it's so great to meet you. So great to have this chance to talk to you. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun. This was great.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Take care.
Thank you for listening to our Behind the Warrior podcast, brought to you by the EOD Warrior Foundation. The EOD Warrior Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization serving the EOD community by providing financial assistance, scholarships, and providing hope and wellness resources for the active duty, reserve, National Guard, retired, and veteran EOD communities and their families. We also honor our fallen and wounded EOD technicians by maintaining the EOD Memorial and Remembrance Garden. We do all this through the generosity of individual and corporate donors and sponsors. If you would like to assist the foundation or support our Behind the Warrior podcast, click the link on our webpage at eodwarriorfoundation.org or contact us at info@eodwarriorfoundation.org. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to tell a friend. The various opinions, beliefs, and viewpoints expressed by guests, contributors, and participants of the Behind the Warrior podcast are their own and are intended for informational purposes only. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions, beliefs, viewpoints, or policies of the EOD Warrior Foundation or its employees and volunteers.